This is an interview with Henry Sleasman, Division of Military and Naval Affairs, Headquarters, Latham, New York. It is the 2nd of April, 2003, approximately 3:10 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Henry Francis Sleasman, and I was born in Albany, New York on April 22nd, 1926.
What was your educational background prior to entering military service?
Loudonville School as a grammar school, and then Philip Livingston, and then Albany. And then when I went into service, I was at SUNY at Coviskill in the college.
Okay. When you heard about Pearl Harbor, where were you and what do you remember? What was your reaction?
Let's see, when Pearl Harbor came, I think I was 16. And I remember there was quite a, you're seeing all of this on we didn't have TV in those days, but what you're seeing in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, at 16, on weekends, I worked at the Strand Theater as an usher, and was seeing all this stuff over and over and over again at the theater, that this was really something, and when we got old enough, this is where I was going to be going.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I got to enlist. I got my father with me, get down to the Coast Guard. And he got down there, and when he got there, he wouldn't sign the papers.
How old were you then, 17?
17.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't sign. So I got, so then I was drafted.
Mm-hmm. Did they assign you to an airborne unit? Or did you?
And I was a volunteer. The third day at Fort Dix, there was, when I registered for the draft, I registered in Schoharie because I was at college. Mm-hmm. And so there was three of us guys together. We said, well, one way for us to stay together is to get into the Airborne. So they stood up, and I'm in the middle, and they stood me up with them. We're for the Airborne. And believe it or not, we might have taken basic together, and after that, I never seen him again till after the war. When I got back, many, the years later, I was in the Pacific. One of them went with the 82nd, the other one was with the 101st. We stayed together, all right.
Where did you receive your training? Would you tell us about your training and where you went and where you received the different?
I went to Fort Bragg right after Dix. We went to Fort Bragg, and I was in artillery. Was at the 105, and that's what's basic all the way through. And it was interesting. Well, again, we were all 18 or 19 years old from all over the country. We were all these young fellas, and then we had all volunteered for the Airborne, so we never walked any place. We were double timing all over. Mm-hmm. And when it came fallout for inspection, fallout in the morning, fallout at night, whatever it was, if we weren't out in the street in, I forget how many seconds it was they want, you went back in and you started all over again. They didn't care how many doors they put on, as long as everybody was in the street at the time, within the time limit. And of course, we were the only battery then that was there, that was all airborne, candidates.
Where did you receive your specialized artillery training?
Was right there.
Was right there, okay.
Right there.
Did you do any jumps at all?
No, that was all basic and all running our legs off and strictly all artillery. Then, the guys all would have, then we had to appear before a board again. Uh-huh. Then they wanted to know all about your health things and all that stuff like that. I had cracked this leg when I was a kid. They called it green stick crack. And so I was then turned down at that point of going to Benning. Mm-hmm. And a lot of guys were turned down going to Benny for one reason or another. And so some of the guys went. Well, anyway, then it just happened to be that there was 6 or 7 of us that took basic together. We all ended up going to Fort Ord, California, and then from Fort Ord, we shipped overseas. And how we all ended up with the 472nd Field Artillery, which was 11th Airborne. None of us had any wings because of what happened. But I mean, this is a war, so get in there. So we fought 11. It wasn't until hostilities ceased in the islands that then they opened up a training camp for gliders and for parachute, and we went, and you had your choice of what you wanted to do. And so I went for the parachute was what we wanted, as the other guys that was with me. We all did. And then if anybody, there was other fellows that came over as replacements, what have you, that some of them, they ended up in glider training then. But then after the glider, losing the 2 gliders, all gliders was brought to a standstill.
Why don't you tell us about that incident? What happened?
Oh, the gliders?
Yes.
Well, they didn't know, nothing was happened yet as far as atomic bombs were concerned, but they were, in case there was an invasion, they were talking, we were in kind of a rest area, and we were doing a lot of this other training. This is when the jump school went on to, and with the gliders, is maybe gliders would be used, not knowing for sure. So they had to get some people ready for that. So they had taken a long flight. They took off from the airfield in Lipa, in the island of Luzon, and they flew quite far that day in this double tow. So they were down over Manila and coming across Manila Bay when they came out of these clouds, and there was a storm, a real storm was coming with a lot of heavy wind, and you could tell that they were into trouble because of the way they were bouncing. I mean, I took the ride in the glider, and I know what it was, to bounce around in that thing. And then one of the wing of the first glider got over too close to the cable for the other one, and it just touched it enough that gave it a problem, because they're only made out of, there's only this thin canvas spread over a pipe, and it done some damage to the wing, and so they cut it loose. Maybe they could glide, but once they cut loose, it was nothing. They just went straight down. And then for some reason, then the second one then cut loose, and the same thing happened. Both of them went straight down and right down, and they sank immediately.
Why did you say you thought that happened? Why do you think they nosed down?
Oh, the only thing I always figured that maybe something happened with the Jeeps. How the Jeeps were attached to the floor. They were chained down, what have you, the floor. Maybe they weren't chained down, whatever. Maybe they tipped. A glider always, when a glider broke loose, a glider always tipped to the ground first. Tipped to the ground and then tipped up again, and then to get on its flight. But when they tipped down, they just never came out of it. Said, did a Jeep break loose and go down right into the pilots and the co-pilots, or they put all the weight in the nose? But for both of them to go down and both of them to sink, and no survivors, that was really taken very, very hard back in because we were already been through a war. Some of these guys had already won Bronze Stars and Purple Hearts and everything else, and now they were down in the bottom of Manila Bay. It was not, some of our people blamed the colonels for this, that we had an instant there that was similar to one that just happened over in Iraq. Somebody threw a grenade into the colonel's tent. It wasn't, the pin wasn't pulled, but they threw a grenade. We never did find out who it was. But boy, everything tightened up right after that. The colonel, every night we had guards, or I ended up being a guard sometimes right at the colonel's tent at night, But I don't we never know what happened to that. So,
Did you have any combat experience?
well, I was up on the line 90 straight days first,
Okay, where was this?
on different parts of the island of Luzon. Okay,
Were you on the initial invasion, or?
we get in just after. I came in through Lungayan Gulf, and then came down, and then the Airborne, the headquarters company had sent up trucks to pick up new people that were coming in, and here the 5 or 6 of us, whatever it was again, that had been together all a while. Back in basic, we all ended up being guys that we picked up, and a couple of other ones, and then they brought us back to the 472nd Field Artillery that they needed replacements. The day we got back, 2 fellows had got killed that day, and 2 more had got wounded that day, so they needed the replacements.
How were you accepted by the unit as replacements? Did you have any trouble assimilating into the unit?
I didn't. I don't know about what the other guys did. I was taken into to the headquarters battery of the 472nd. I already had a driver's license for a truck, and being that you were a PFC, you were going to do whatever you were told. So I started off being a ammunition handler, and hauling ammunition up to the guns, and then I got to do driving a truck more the same as everybody else did, hauling whatever was coming in by ship, or sometimes you go to the ship to pick up the ammo. Sometimes we were picking it up at a depot somewhere. And then at nighttime, you guys that worked all day out there doing that, well, the guns had bothered my ears, so I was at the VA this morning. They got my hearing aids. I'm having trouble with them. My ears got hurt with that, and so I just couldn't stand to be up on the firing of the guns. I couldn't be that close to it, and so that's why I was put off and all the rest of the stuff. But at nighttime, after you got back to your area where you were set up with the 105s, we were the guys that went out in the machine gun nest way out in the front as the perimeter people. And that's where on Easter morning, 1945, well, they had told us we had these Japs that are surrounded on this mountain, that we could look for maybe a banzai attack that particular night. And so everybody out there, and they got, be on the lookout all night. Well, we had a moonlit night, which was good, and so there was three of us in our 50 caliber, and we had a few sandbags in front of us and everywhere. And so we took our turns, a couple hours on and then 4 hours off or something else. And then I'm watching and it's my time when I'm awake, and I'm watching what the field glass is. And I thought I could see seven things that would move way over along. It was all open where we were, but then just ahead of that was all coconut trees, coconut grove. And then I didn't know there was a ditch there at that time, but there was like a ditch. So you could see a little hump, and then you couldn't see a hump. And kept watching it, and I was able to come up, I counted seven humps that would appear and then disappear, appear and disappear. So then I woke up another guy, and he's looking. Well, at the time I woke up the other 2. So we're all looking through the glasses and said, that's definitely something moving down that, whatever it is. And we thought for sure, geez, that could be a mortar squad, or Japanese mortar or something else. So we waited until we had really had a good look. One of the times when the humps were up, and being we're the only ones that had seen it, I was on the gun, and I opened up with the 50, closed. And then all I had to do was open up with that 50, and every other machine gun all the way around, they were every gun opened, and there must be something out there, because everybody starts shooting. And then, of course, then you're, back at the headquarters, they didn't know what the heck's going on. Anyway, it wasn't until morning. In the morning, I said to, it was daylight, let's go out and see what we were shooting at last night. So as we started out, we crawled out. And as we looked down, we seen 6, you could see there was 6 Japanese bodies. There wasn't 7, there was 6 that was there. Said if there was a 7th one, well, we all counted 7 humps once it got away. So we started to go down into this little ditch-like, and somewheres, something in there, there was a booby trap somewheres. And somehow, only there was 2 of us, it got tripped, and I didn't hear it. My friend said, hit the dirt tight. We hit the dirt. My steel helmet went flying on them, and the thing went off, and then I don't know where the rest of shrapnel went, but I got shrapnel in from here all the way up to here, in this leg. Nothing in my head, nothing in any part of my body, and he was over more to the left of me, and he didn't get anything. It just, so it had to be a small charge of some kind, but it was enough to put. What saved me a lot was with the big old pockets, where I had, you had your handkerchief, you had your wallet, you had other stuff, and to me, in a Catholic, good old kind of way, I had the rosary box that my wife, she wasn't my wife then, but she had given me to go away with, and all that stuff. So I took shrapnel into my wallet, but I mean, I got enough into my leg that, anyway. So then we couldn't stop the bleeding there, so we start going back, and then the other guy came out, and they helped me, one on each side of me, got me back to where the 105s were, and we got me back to the doctor. So the doctor put me on a stretcher laying on the ground, and then the doctor gets all of his tools and brings me. He said, I got nobody to help me, so he says, you're going to have to hold the instruments while I do this. When he opens me up and he starts taking out the pieces, he says, you want them? I said, you're damn tootin', I want them. So he got the stuff, and I'm holding, well, he had stuck it, he gave me some of it. And he took out, he said, I'm only taking out what I can get now, and then I'm going to patch you up, and then you're going back on the first truck that's out of here. And which I did. I went back and ended up in a field hospital then for a couple of weeks. That was down in well, it was right on the water anyway. It was good. After you started to get good, then they made you go in the salt water every day for your healing to help with the healing of the leg. But I was 18 years old. On my 19th birthday, I was back into headquarters at the rear echelon, and my name came up on the bulletin board that I was to go back up that day on the next truck that came through to go back to join the group up front. The only time I cried in the Army, I went into the first sergeant and I cried. And I said, I won't be so lucky the next time. I said, I'll probably come back in a bag. And he said, son, he was an old-time sergeant. Son, we all got to do our part. And you're only a young fella. I'm sure you'll be all right. But you got to go. You got to go. And so I went, and we were, being the kind of people we were at 18 and 19 years old, we were hell-bent for election. We never stopped for anything. That's why so many of us were used for different jobs. I carried messages at night back to divisions at times, and going back with a Jeep we'd go back for miles and miles and miles with this stuff, back through, because there wasn't any front lines in the islands, you were going through hostile territory, most of the time didn't know it, it depends on whether anybody's seen you or what was going to take place. And my one friend that was a colonel's driver, and him and I was very close friends. I used to ride with him a lot when he carried the message, and both of us carried Thompson subs, and he had already had a Silver Star, and I wasn't looking for a Silver Star, but I went with him because I knew he was good, and between us we had a lot of firepower, and we weren't afraid to do what we were doing. So we might have, we sprayed an awful lot of jungle and threw a few grenades at night, so,
So that's what you carried as your weapon, was a Thompson?
I had a Thompson, and then in the earlier parts of the war, I was able to get a hold of a Philippine that had a 1917 model of the 45, no safety. I bought it for $50 off of them, and they had a holster. They had a holster and stuff they had made, and I had that, so I had that tied down on my leg. Had the 45 in the holster with 5 rounds in it, so I didn't shoot myself in the foot, and it had the sub. So I had plenty of firepower, and my friend, he carried a 45 too. So you needed all of this kind of stuff, and there was other scrapes that we were in. You turn that off for a minute.
Okay. How long were you in combat in the Philippines?
From February of 45 to, till we left the island. We left the island after they dropped the first atomic bomb. When they dropped that first bomb, I was in a field hospital again because I had got a ringworm infection in my scar, and I was in the hospital for that. And I didn't know what happened. None of us in the hospital knew what was going on. All of a sudden, the anti-aircraft guns start going off that were anywhere near us, that they weren't that far away with that. Anti-aircraft guns, all that stuff. We don't hear any planes. We haven't been under an air. The only time I was ever under an air attack is when I got off the ship, to come down the side and go get in little boats, and they were being attacked by airplanes then. But otherwise, I had never been under an air attack. And that was in the island of Leyte, and not even in Luzon. It was in Leyte. And so...
excuse me, prior to going in the hospital, though, you had been training for the invasion of Japan, correct?
Right.
So what was your reaction when you heard about the dropping of the atomic bombs?
Well, not knowing what an atomic bomb was, all I knew, if they dropped something that was so big that, that they're hoping that this is going to end it, General Swing, Sergeant Joe Swing, Jumpin' Joe, he came in the hospital that morning and he walked through. He says, "I want every man that can walk, I want him out of here today." He says, "We're leaving the island, we're going to Japan." And so I waited almost the whole day before my outfit ever come to pick me up. What the heck, how come? Anyway, they come to pick me up. By the time I get back to our area, the tents were all down. The guys had my stuff all packed in duffel bags. What they tried to do is then they tried to fly everybody out. We left the island of Luzon and we flew to Okinawa, and then we were bivouacked in Okinawa for about a week and a half before we went into Japan. That's when they dropped the other bomb. So to get our things ready, well, they don't have enough planes to move a complete division by air, and that's what they wanted to do. So they had some B-24 bombers. So there was an airstrip right near that we had built. So the B-24s came in there, but in the B-24, in my write-ups that I got written up about this. It was, they could only put 10 or 12 men in with their gear in a B-24, and they put them in the bomb bays. The first three took off fine, took off and right up over the tree. The fourth one to take off couldn't clear the trees. Hit the trees on the end of the runway, crashed, burned immediately. One person walked out of that alive, of the 11th Airborne, and it was the first lieutenant. Everybody else that was in there was lost. That's when the general said, no more B-24s. So they had all kinds of calls out. The next thing you know, these tractor trailers came in from Clark Air Force Base in Manila, and they started loading us on these trucks, taking us down to Clark Airfield. And then there was planes coming in from different parts to load us in, and I was, well, most of them that was around down there was the C-24s and the 24s and the 46,
47.
C-47s and 46s, the same ones, that was the workhorses of the, and so we flew to Okinawa and landed at Naha Airstrip, and of course, when you're bringing a full division in, well, there's no place just to put anybody, you know. So we were put, the 472nd Field Artillery, we were put into a cemetery right off of the runway. It was a Japanese cemetery right off the runway at the airstrip. And we had to put up then the little pup tents, and we bivouacked. I think it was about a week. It was a little over a week and a half. We were there. And then they armed us to the teeth again, and all of our hair was cut off. We're back to real short hair. And so our helmets fit tighter. And they didn't know how we were going to be going in. And then again, they brought in more planes. So I was with one of the first groups to go up. And we went into the Yokohama airstrip. And our job when we got there was to fill the holes in the runways so they could start to bring planes in, more planes. Once we got the holes filled in and what have you, the planes start coming in right around the clock, just bringing people and supplies. We had 3 days worth of rations that we carried on our back, and we were armed with grenades all over us, and like we were going into full combat. And I said, if the Japs ever changed their mind, they had us all dead right there, because everything they thought they bombed that they had, they didn't have, because there it was, right there. The stuff that was underground that came up, the anti-aircraft guns that was underground, the firepower. That was one of the jewels. After we got the holes filled in the runway, our jobs then was to stuff all kinds of muzzles of guns and blow them up. Any airplane that was on any of the Jap airplanes that was there, we were they were told there were certain things we had to take off the airplanes, just so that they couldn't fly. They had Japanese guards, was around. We could see them at a distance, but that was all part of the deal. They had to be out sometime. We were there 8 days before the big Mo came in to sign the peace. And so we were the division that he had picked, MacArthur picked. That's why the 11th Airborne was in Japan. So down where they brought the big Mo in, they had a big old sign that's, I don't know, the 511 parachuter, the one, I think it was a 511 that did it. Made a big old sign, 11th Airborne welcomes the Marines to Japan. The Marines had hit all the other islands first and what have you here. We were the ones that were picked for there, And that was then the 11th Airborne, like the 511, they had some people that really went hog wild there and start shooting up, because we were still armed to the teeth. One of them, they go and rob the bank, Then if they could get any booze, anything else, the guys got into and so much trouble was caused with some of the division that all of the division was punished. We were not going to be MacArthur's force that was going to stay in Tokyo, in Yokohama. We were sent north to get away from, and the 1st Cavalry Division got what we had and lost. And so we were sent to Sendai. Well, I was sent to Yokohama, 472nd. We went to Yokohama, which had been a Japanese cavalry post, and it was a post that had a moat around it, just like a castle. And then they had the barracks in there, and they had all the horses and stuff. The horses were there. So we took over the horses, taking care of them, and then they wanted us to clean out the barracks. Well, we started cleaning out the barracks, bringing everything out and burning it, and within 2 days, we all had fleas. So then they had to delouse us. Then we had to take our clothes off, and then they had to be soaked in this stuff and cooked and then washed and, to get rid of. So there was no more going back in the buildings. They thought they could get them all so we could live in them, but we couldn't. So we were in our tents that stayed out on the parade grounds. But there was a lot of guns and swords and all that stuff there. Everything was gathered up then and put into one building and locked, and we had guards on that all the time. And then, but we could take the horses out. We took the horses out. We stayed within the grounds of the cavalry post and could ride the horses. The only thing, the horses didn't understand English, that's the difference. And then they moved them then into a school, got us away from there, and we moved into a school, and took over that school. And some of the fellows then got the word to go home, that they had enough points, and they went home. So then they said, 2 of them, well, we had battalion mess. 2 of them 3 of them was cooks. And so then the old man said, well, we need men for cooks. And I know they were giving me a lot of guard duty because that's all we were going to end up with as still PFC. We were going to do guard duty all a while. And I liked to cook. So me and one of the mechanics from the motor pool both volunteered for cooks, and we were picked, okay, to go into battalion mess as cooks. And so we had 18 Japanese KPs, and we did our thing. What was nice about that, you was on one day and off a day, and on a day and off a day. That's what I like about that, no guard duty. So I was doing that, and that was fine. And then all of a sudden, one day they came to me and said, get your bags packed, you're moving to division headquarters. Well, what did I do wrong? There's a letter here that says you are to report to the APO in Sendai, Japan, which is where the division headquarters was at that time, to the post office. And I got there. When I got to Sendai, then somebody met me, and they took me, to the post office, and find out that I was working in the post office as an extra when I was home even when I was going to high school. I worked there during Christmas seasons, and I worked there like the guys took vacations. It was a Class 2 post office in Loudonville. And Loudonville is where I was born and brought up, and I worked in that post office, sorting mail and all that stuff. I did everything but handle money in the window. So that was, when I went into services, what was you doing once I was at school? It was post office, and that was on my record. So, geez, what they had. Writing money orders. They put me writing money orders 12 hours a day. There was one whole room of us, that's all we did, was just write money orders. And I wrote that for a long time, and I just didn't like writing money orders. We were writing with the old pens, too. You had to pluck in the ink, and I was writing money orders all day long. Then your biggest thing was, any mistakes, you paid for them. Then to take the Japanese money and to convert it over so you're writing it in the right dollars and cents. So the fellow that was running all of the mail back and forth to the post office, and running to meet the trains and what have you, that drove the truck all over, said he wanted to, because I used to relieve him sometimes if he wanted to do something else at night. I would do the mail run to the trains at night. So he said, he said, I'd like to have your job. I said, I'd like to have your job. So we talked to our major that was in charge of the post office. And, if you guys want to switch, it's okay with me, So I said, boy, was I glad to get rid of that. But I liked doing the mail and running all over with the mail. And then I drove, because we didn't have a Jeep, so wherever the major wanted to go, I'd drive him in a 6x. So that worked for a long time. I was there through Christmas of '45. I was doing that through Christmas. And you had Special Services was there in Sendai, and with the Red Cross, and they had a big building, they had shows coming in, what have you. This was the USO Shows came in. But they also had bought old ice cream freezers they bought in Australia. And the money from the 11th Airborne did, and they had them brought up. Well, when I went to college, when I went to Cobleskill, I was in the dairy industry. So ice cream and milk or whatever, so I used to go over, talk with them stuff. So anyway, I got a transfer from the post office to Special Service. In Special Service, then I was in the ice cream plant. And I was making ice cream 6 days out of the week, making ice cream. And then in the meantime, I was running the moving picture sometimes at night for battalion headquarters, and everybody else could come, the big thing. And then when USO shows came, well, we were always right there. Well,
Who were some of the USO shows that you saw? Did you say any prominent persons?
well, when I went to the next island, I wasn't involved with the USO too much there. They were all being done there, so I've seen them shows. The 27th Division got relieved. The 27th Division was up in the northern island of Hokkaido. And General Swing was moving division headquarters, splitting it up, but he was moving to Sapporo, Japan. And parts of every unit was going. And then out of Special Service, I think there was 18 of us in Special Service at that time. And they were taking half of the ice cream equipment, we were taking it up there. So I was going with my ice cream equipment. And there was 6 of us that went to Sapporo with the general. And so I did the ice cream plant. Well, then being you're up there when you're in a smaller area where you didn't have everybody, you had parts of 511, the 181st, we had parachute maintenance, and we had the MPs, and we didn't have also, because half of them were still back in Sendai. So I didn't have to make ice cream 6 days out of the week. I could make ice cream, I could make it maybe 3 days out of the week, and then we shipped it. Usually always we shipped on Friday or Saturday so that the ice cream could be had Saturday or Sunday out at the outlying groups. And so the building that we were in, they put it in a building that had, I don't know what the building was before, but anyway, we got there in the wintertime. And we were given skis and snowshoes to travel with because they don't snowplow. The only thing that got snowplowed was the railroad tracks, but they never snowplowed. We didn't know we had 6 stairs in front of our building to go in. And then there was 3 small apartments like that was in there. And so us guys that was in Special Service, we split it up 2 and 2 and 2. Well, I ended up with our sergeant and the general secretary, and us. We shared a 3-room apartment together there. And then when I wasn't making ice cream, that's when I got involved with the USO shows. So Phil's Platonic and his all-girl orchestra, when the snow was all gone, was one of the big ones that I spent a lot of time with, because they were there with us for 3 days or 4 days, whatever it was. And I was in charge of transporting the girls all over, and then getting into the show, and but then also taking them out to different areas, and they were always, other than the show day, they went to different places to eat with the troops. General Swing's orders was to me, I don't want them in the officers' clubs. I want them with the enlisted men. That was a hard problem, too. Because you had brass that was putting pressure on you. Yeah. But Colonel Quant, who was the chief of staff, Colonel Quant, I don't know, I just loved that man. I got so close to him. Here I was a PFC, but I liked him, and he liked me. And he would call, in the morning, when the train came in, the movies used to come in by train. Oh, and I was in charge of all moving pictures on that island. I had to who had what movies and sent it to them, and also all moving picture machines. I was in charge of it on the island. So what I didn't come and tell, he said, "What come in today?" And it was Stars and Stripes came. I ordered Gate, took him his papers, and also for the general. And he'd say, "What movies you got now?" Told him. He said, "Well," he said, "I'll tell the old man and see what he wants. If he wants to see a movie tonight, I'll call you. We'll call special service." He says, "And we'll send the Jeep driver over to pick you up after dinner and come back, then you show the movie." So I was the general's private projectionist at night and showed him. The one time that the general, my heart went out for him, is when the 82nd Airborne came back and marched down to Heavy in New York City, and we got the film of that coming, and I showed that, and the old man sat there with his whole staff, watched that movie, and he kept saying, "That should have been us. That should have been us. That should have been us." When I finished the reel, he said, "Rewind it, will you?" He says, "and show it to me again." And halfway through the second part, he got up and walked out. He had tears in his eyes. He wanted that. He thought that we should have been the one to do that parade. I mean, 82nd was great. They did their thing too. We did ours. I don't know. It would have been nice if we all could have been there together. But that was the one time the old man did. But the general was good. I even traveled with the general at certain times. He was going out to an outlying unit. You know how these things work. Out to outlying unit. I never went out. We had other uniforms that we wore. I'd go out as a master sergeant and I was a PFC, but so that I could talk to the troops individually. How's the food? What's going on? What's the play? How much recreation do you get? How's all these things? The general told me everything he wanted to know. And then I would meet with him somewhere in the evening and be able to tell him what I found out. And then you go back with the troops, whatever you were doing. And so for the 2 or 3 days that we were gone, I wasn't the only one. There was 2 or 3 of us that went, but that's what we did. And then we reported to him, so he knew really what was going on. Because he said, he said, you step up in front of a guy standing there and you say, "Son, how's things?" "Fine, sir." "Do you get a lot of record?" "Yeah." "Oh, yes, sir." "How's the food?" "It's great, sir." He said, "I want you to find out the real answers." He says, and then come back and let me know. And that's what I said. That's the way he was, and I really liked him for it.
When did you end up going back to the States?
August of '46. I was discharged around the 17th or 18th of August, because I came back on an old banana boat, and we came into Fort Lewis, Washington, and then we came across by train into New Jersey. Another time, another history of me. The first, they get on the train, we're all ready to go. He said, well, they come through the car. It was funny. The officer come through the car. He says, we're going to need KPs on it. We're going to have, there's 2 dining cars, because the train was so long, it was split up, and we're going to be in so-and-so car. And so we need KPs, these cars. And I said, my friends, I said, let's volunteer. He said, are you crazy? We're going home. I said, yeah, but we're in Seattle, Washington. It's a long ways to New Jersey. So I asked another friend, he says, yeah, okay, what the heck? Then we only got on the train. We go to the kitchen, and damn it, the mess sergeant isn't somebody we took basic with. We were all set. The KP, that first day, when the officers came through that night, I said, I want to stay KP all the way. My friend says, I want to stay too. We stayed the same crew. We stayed together all the way to New Jersey, because when the train stopped, we were the only ones that could get off. We got off to take on ice and take on other foods or whatever, and MPs always stood in the doors of our train so the guys couldn't get off. And then they were eating 2 meals a day, and we were eating 3, you know. And plus, we had plenty of activity. They were just sitting there playing cards and all day long, and, you know, I'm not a card player, so that wouldn't have been good for me. So I was volunteered for that, and it was another one of them good volunteers. It worked out to be a good thing. We got to the end. So.
Did you ever use the GI Bill after the war?
Yes. Yeah, I went 17 days after, or 18 days after I was out of service. I was back in school. I went right straight, well, it was August, and school started in late September. I mean, I went back to Coviskill and signed up in, and I started back in again. I needed another semester, and I went back for that one semester.
Did you ever use the 5220 club?
Never.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
I joined the VFW Manans, and I stayed in that for quite a few years. Then my breakaway with that, well, anyway, I joined the Navy Reserve. I joined the Navy Reserve because I wanted to be in the Navy. I joined the Seabees, the reserves, supposed to be. That's when the Korean War got going, and then they didn't use me. I got a rate. I took a test. I was a petty officer, 2nd class, Navy. As I got sworn in, they said, down at the Port of Albany, at the old, we have a stevedore unit. It's starting, and we need people. We need cadre, people. So I went down. I never did get back to Troy to the Seabees. I went down to stevedores, and I was down there. And as young fellows would enlist into the reserve, they would send them down there to us before they went off, and we would give them close order drill and giving them master of arms and all this kind of stuff. And then they kept taking, the Navy was pulling the people out of the unit. They pulled people out until there was only 2 of us left. There was a damage controlman and me were the only 2 that weren't taken. So when my enlistment finished there, that was it. A few years later, I joined the National Guard, the 127th at New Scotland Avenue. And I did, well, anyway, between my Army, Navy, and my National Guard, I ended up with 13 years service. The reason I got out of National Guard, I had just re-enlisted again when the Cuban crisis came, and I was working in the city of Montreal. I was with the Consolidated Freightways Trucking when I had the sales office in Montreal. And so I was too far away from my unit, and I was one of the key people, so they had to discharge me again. And so I just plain never got back, and I wanted to do my 20, and I never did get to do my 20. So.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that you served with?
We did in the beginning, and I mean, as all things, you're writing letters, and then somebody writes, and then somebody don't write a letter. I even had a couple of USO girls that that I had written to and had written to me, and then Red Cross Red Cross girls that was in Sapporo too. We got very close with some of them, and I heard from them for a while, I mean, after the war, and then you just, after we come home, you just didn't hear about it anymore. You just you fall back into school, then it was work, I went to work, and then in June 12th of 1948, I got married. I was 22 years old. This June 12th, I'll be married 55 years. Now, this thing with this Franciscans with me, there's a community, all through the United States now, there's communities of different religious orders where some of us, well, you need it here, but some of us are married and some of us are single. And I'm in the Franciscans of St. Damiano. And I was a secular Franciscan for 42 years. As a secular, I went through all the different classes. I mean, I took a lot of training for these years. So when I went for this, I was taken right on in. I had my habit within a short time, and I go on retreat twice a year. And I got to do Vespers tonight over at the Little Sisters. And this is the other half of my life now as being a Franciscan. And I'm a professed Franciscan. I have taken the vow of chastity, and at 77 years of age, that it's not giving me any problem. But I mean, when I took the vow with the rest of our people, and so I still have. Oh, from the National Guard, I got a uniform shirt that I can get into yet, I'm sure. Got all my medals on there, or all my ribbons. And so I haven't had a picture, and when I was in Florida, I just come back from Florida Wednesday. I was down for the 30 days with my wife, but I have bought a pair of khaki pants, I think, that I can match with the shirt. And I do have my red beret, and I could get dressed up so that I could give you a picture of me in uniform.
Sounds good. How do you, I guess in conclusion, how do you think your service affected your life? I know, you told us about some of the negative things, maybe.
But the good things was, well, learning how to get along with a lot of people, being ambitious and being working. You learned a lot of different things that you wouldn't have learned that you learned in the military. It was about looking out for the other fella and how we worked close together, which you didn't have in a lot of things when you got home, But I liked what I learned. And I mean, as I went over when I went into the National Guard, that's why they brought me in as my rate that I was coming from the Navy with Petty Officer Second, which started me as a staff sergeant. And I started as a staff, and within 2 months I was a sergeant first class, and that's the rate that I hold and held through there. Because I was in supply. Then they had me, then I was in, because they wanted somebody who was a soldier. And so they put me in charge of the communications. We had 17 people, battalion communications. I was battalion communications sergeant, and I didn't know the first thing about running radios or the radar, but I knew how to soldier, and that's what they wanted. Because we had master sergeants in there that acted like PFCs, They had the rank, but they had really never been in service, and those things. And I did that I was supply sergeant back and forth, and then the first sergeant and I had a deal. We went to camp. We were at Camp Drum. If we went out into the field, maybe he'd stay back, and he could look after supplies and take the laundry, and I was first sergeant when we went in the field. And I always said, I liked a lot of military. If my wife would have been one to have liked that, I probably would have stayed in. I've always felt that that's why I kept going back. I mean, there's a part of me that I liked about the military, and I respect the military 100%. I just feel sorry for our guys that's over there now. Really feel that the 82nd and the 101st and all the rest of them, but the airborne ones are the ones I always think about first. Knowing what they're going through.
Well, thank you very much for your interview.